Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lori. I'm here with the wonderful Dan Hughes, who will be your presenter today. And it's all about taking holiday photos and turning them into beautiful images using the Nik collection. So hopefully, if you have the software, you've been using it and enjoying it. If you haven't used it yet, or maybe you just are a brand new user to it, you're going to learn some basics, and I'm sure he'll throw in some little tidbits along the way as well. Dan has been a longtime user of Nik. In fact, he worked for Nik Software many years ago and then Google. So he is probably one of the first and foremost people knowledgeable as far as the Nik collection is concerned, and other things as well, since he's a faculty member at RIT. So his life revolves around photography. I know that you're going to really enjoy watching him do the demonstration. We're ready to get started, Dan.
Cool.
So thanks again for joining us.
Oh my gosh, my absolute pleasure. These are always really fun. And this is a particularly fun topic to get to talk about. Talk about the Nik collection, maybe a little bit about photography, and hopefully answer some of your questions as well. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to talk about utilizing the Nik collections to enhance your images, different kinds of images, snapshot images, maybe more formal photographs, images potentially used for holiday cards or something like that. I've tried to choose their sort of smattering of different kinds of images. I understand that we have very different kinds of photographers in this webinar, from seasoned veterans and pros, portrait photographers, landscape photographers, just family photographers, folks who like to document their family in any way, shape, and form. And what's fun about this webinar is that it can relate to anybody, you know, who wants to enjoy their friends and family and the holidays, and maybe think about enhancing their images just a little bit to take it past whatever the camera gave you right off the bat. So we're going to start out by utilizing Viveza, talking about control points. We'll move into utilizing Color Efex Pro, and then we'll jump into utilizing Analog Efex Pro to just add a vintage effect, and I'll walk you through the basic use of the software. So when you open it up and try it out, you can get some really interesting and cool results on some different kinds of photographs. All right, let's close that. So I am launching the tools within Adobe Photoshop today, but of course these pieces of software, the Nik collection will plug into DxO, so the DxO Photo Lab software, Lightroom, as well as a whole bunch of other tools, and they will work as standalone pieces of software. There are some subtle and slight differences depending upon how you launch the tools. And for example, in Photoshop, you have this, which is the Nik Selective tool. It's one of the ways that you can access the software. It's the way that we're primarily going to be accessing the software today. The other way to do it in Photoshop, if you don't want to use this sort of floating dock, is you can go to the filter drop-down menu, down to the Nik collection, and you've got the suite loaded in there. All right, so I am here within Photoshop 2021 on a Mac. By the way, I do like to use shortcuts within the Nik suite. I will try to translate them into PC as well. But let's jump right in. So our first image here is this really lovely photograph of a family. Looks like there's some dough. I guess we're making like maybe some cinnamon buns or something based upon what I'm gathering from this photograph. But it's a really lovely moment in time, and the result is great, but I want to sort of enhance it a little bit, direct your attention as the viewer and control the viewer's attention through the image. And I'm going to click on Viveza to do that. As that launches, it'll take it a second to launch. Our image right now has a sort of warm color cast to it, which is really quite lovely given the situation. But one interesting, fun, and cool way of controlling the viewer's attention in an image, right? So let's say you share this on your website or on your Facebook or social media, or possibly print the image, right? We can separate the tones. We can separate the subject from the background, and we can do it using contrast, of course. We can we can utilize color as well to do that. And so we're going to do both of those things, and we're going to do that here within Viveza using control points. For now, I'm going to go ahead and just minimize our presets over here on the left-hand side. As I do that, we're going to use Viveza here simply with control points. We're going to come back into this tool later, and I'm going to sort of expand upon some of the capabilities. But for now, anyone who's not familiar, this software is designed, Viveza 3 from the Nik collection is designed to control light and color. And in my opinion, most powerful way to do that in an image like this is to do it selectively. That is in a targeted way, where we look at the background and we treat the background differently than maybe the middle ground, differently maybe from our subjects. So in this approach, it's a good idea typically to try to work in the sort of macro to micro, or work on the bigger areas in the image and then get into the details later on. So the image has been processed utilizing some sort of raw processor. I actually didn't use or didn't have a raw file of this image. But it would have been either shot in camera as JPEG or in RAW and processed. And we have a little bit of a color cast here and there. So one of the ways of taking care of that is using control points to selectively enhance these different color bits. If you follow my cursor over to the right-hand side of the interface, I'm going to go ahead and actually just skip over all of these things. We don't have enough time to talk about every single tool. If you want to learn more about the different tools within Viveza, there's tons of webinars and content posted on the DxO Nik Software YouTube channel that you can watch. But for now, I just want to introduce you to what I think is the most powerful tool here, and that is control points. So click on control points. So there's a little icon there. Just click on that little icon, and then what you do is just simply click on the object that you want to adjust. So a little point is dropped on the object that we've clicked on. And now we can change the area of influence, which is the size in which that point is going to affect, right? And I will talk more about that and what that means. But basically, I'll just encompass this entire background back here. And then I'm going to scroll down on the right side into what are called my selective adjustments. So you can see on the right side, it says selective adjustments. We're going to click on that control point. It's active. I know it's active because it's gold. It's highlighted. And what we're going to do is actually take this warmth slider and we're going to drag it to the left. We're going to cool that background down just a little bit. We're not going to, if I take this warmth slider and I bring it all the way over, I'm really skewing the color of that background, and that could be really effective. But usually I don't find myself taking any of these individual sliders all the way over to the left or all the way over to the right. I try and find some sort of happy bit between the 0 and whatever the effect is that I want. And rarely it's all the way over to the -100 or positive 100. Anyways, taking the warmth to the left, I'm going to take this blue slider to the right. And what that will do is subtly add blue into that background back there. And now we've actually already got some color separation, right? I've only used one control point, and we've already kind of cooled off the background back here a little while leaving the foreground warm. And what we're going to get from that is a sort of sense of distance because of the difference of color. Let's take a look at that. If you follow my cursor into the upper left sort of quadrant of the interface, and I press the before image or the compare button, you'll see the before. And I let go of the compare button and watch the background there. You see the after. It's subtle. I'm actually probably taking a little bit further than I need to, but it's effective, right? And we're doing this using sort of color theory in this case, where we're cooling, an aspect of color theory, where we're cooling down one area to sort of have it be subdued into the background. And then what we'll do is we'll sort of warm or keep different parts of the image a little bit warmer in color tone, and that's going to give us more depth. So we're going to take another one of those control points. I'm going to place it on this background back here on the cabinets back here. I'm going to scroll over on the right side into our selective adjustments. And I'm going to do that same thing. I'm just going to take my warmth slider to the left. As I do that, I notice, so if you take the warmth slider to the right, it's going to warm whatever you place the control point on. If you take it to the left, it's going to cool. It's going to, make it more green and blue and cyan as you take that warmth slider to the left. And that works to a point. If I take it too far, the background just looks like this weird green color, and it isn't super effective. It kind of looks gross. So what we're going to do is reduce that effect by bringing the warmth back down. But we know if we take it too far, it goes green. So if I take my warmth slider, bring it back a little bit, and then I actually go into my green slider and I reduce the green just a little, I can kind of balance out. I can get more out of cooling the background, and I can do that by basically reducing a little bit of the green because the background was going a little green. Anyways, I don't want to go too far into that. What we want to talk about are control points. I've cooled down that background. Let's brighten up our subjects a little bit and add a little bit of contrast on our subjects. And I think with just a couple more control points where you literally just drop the point on the subject or the object that you want to adjust, then move over into your selective adjustment sliders, you can then adjust things like brightness and contrast, as well as saturation. I've brightened up her face a little bit. And so if I'm going to brighten some of the areas of highlight on her face using a control point, it might be a good idea to remove a little bit of saturation so that it doesn't look oversaturated as I brighten up the image. Okay, so the idea here is that we're directing the viewer's attention, and then specifically we are targeting different parts of the image and adjusting based upon how we want to direct the viewer's attention. The human eye is going to be attracted to the brightest thing in the image, the brightest, the most saturated, and the most contrasty things in the image. The human eye is also going to be sort of attracted to other human forms and a human face. So we can help enhance that. I can help direct the viewer's attention by going into these areas of interest, these areas that are important in the photograph, and brightening them up and drawing attention to those areas by just dropping control points. And then from there, we can direct the viewer's attention away from other areas, right? So even very subtly and even very specifically. So I've brightened up the little kid's face here, and I've brightened up our baker's face. And then what we'll do is go into this shadow area down here and just subtly darken some of those tones. And we'll get contrast because we're darkening down certain areas and we're brightening up other areas, but we get very specific and controlled contrast. So we can control the viewer's attention. Now, on most holiday images, we're not going to spend this much time, right? But on some holiday images, we might spend this much time, in which case, really directing the viewer's attention to make the image glow is going to be very effective. I used quite a few control points there, and I might have gotten this, made it more complex than I need to talk about, but we're getting into sort of theories of being able to direct viewers' attention through the image. And it's very easy to do utilizing these control points. Let's take a look at the before and after. So I'm going to move up into the sort of upper quadrant here. We used the compare button before, but let's go ahead and just click on the side-by-side image. And then I'll click here. And what you'll notice, let's hide the tool set. The enhanced image is on the right, and the original image is on the left. And these are subtle changes for the most part. But if you kind of lean back in your chair, you don't even really need to squint too much. Your eye is probably going to be directed towards or pulled towards the right side image because of these minute bits of contrast and color contrast that we've added. Of course, we could go a lot further than that if we needed to, but I think in a lot of images, we just need to guss it up a little bit, direct the viewer's attention maybe a little bit more. And the control points are a subtle way, or can be a subtle way, they also can be very dramatic, but can be a subtle way of really directing the viewer's attention in a very natural and photographic kind of method, right? So that the resulting image is enhanced, it's better, if you will, it directs the viewer's attention, at least in my opinion here. I'm gonna click the apply button in the lower right corner. But using Viveza, you can keep that photographic look and feel, but you can create an image that is a little bit more engaging, a little bit more refined, and so on, without transforming the photograph into something completely different. All right, so let's keep moving. The next image is a sort of holiday group picture. The last one here, we've got like a winter holiday kind of photograph here. I figure this is sort of more of a summer holiday kind of image. And this is a film scan as well. So a lot of folks, especially around this time, are feeling nostalgic, and so like to scan film and scan prints. I think this was actually a scan of a print, but either way, they look great. You want to make a print of them. Oftentimes the prints don't look ideal because of various issues, because of the scan, because of the original, who knows. But anyways, you can use Viveza really quickly and easily to fix these kinds of things up. Before I do that, we're in Photoshop. There's thousands of different things that we could do in Photoshop, but the thing that I want to do before we go into Viveza again is just get rid of the person squatting or playing a game or whatever they're doing back here in the background, because in my mind, they're very bright and I'm distracted by them over there on the right side. So we'll just use a tool in Photoshop, the content aware tool. I've got to switch into my lasso, sorry. And I'll just do it right on the background here for this, because we're not really talking about these kinds of tools, but it's definitely something to think about. Before you go into Viveza, look around the image and see if there's any pixel movement you need to do. And that is definitely not perfect, right? We probably want to spend a little bit more time if we're going to print the image, but if this was just going to be posted on a web, on Facebook or on Instagram or your website or whatever, and it's not terribly important that every detail is exactly as necessary, that flies. And in fact, the quickness in which we can work is both precise as well as can fly, because it's very fast. Let's click on Viveza, open this up, and I want to show you a preset within Viveza. Last time we just sort of jumped right in with control points, but there are presets that are built in, and you can create your own presets. So if you scan a roll of film or scan a bunch of prints and they all have a similar color cast or a contrast problem or something, create your own preset, and then you can save it and use it for the next image. And I'll show you how to do that pretty quickly here. So on the left side of Viveza, we have our presets. And I'm gonna go into preset number 6, and I'm gonna click on tonal adjustment, because this image, well, let's cover this and then we'll talk about the image. I clicked on the preset there on the left side, and this Nik software warning comes up and it says adding a preset is gonna replace whatever tools and adjustments you used on the right side. Right, because the things on the left side over here, these presets, are just predetermined tools, adjustment of the tools over here on the right side. In fact, I'm going to click no. One of the things you're going to notice is that when you open the image, all of these sliders are probably going to be at 0, at least initially with a picture. If you click on one of these presets, like tonal adjustment, now it's not letting me do it. Let's try again. There we go. And then I say yes, that it's okay to change those parameters. You'll notice a lot of these sliders, they're going to be adjusted, right? And that's because those presets on the left side are simply making these predetermined adjustments to the image. And I want to do this on this photograph with that tonal adjustment preset because it does a nice job to kind of get some of the highlight details back and bring a little bit of texture back into the image. Now, the presets aren't necessarily going to be perfect right off the bat, because they're preset and every image is different, but they are a great starting point. And here I think it works nicely. I do need to adjust the contrast a little bit, but let's talk about what's happening with that tonal adjustment preset. If you follow my cursor over to the right-hand side, sorry, my phone's going off here. On the right-hand side, we have a histogram in the upper right corner, and we have a loop in the upper right corner. Underneath that are your global adjustments. And right now, my brightness and contrast, as well as my structure, have been adjusted from that preset. I like what's happening here overall. So I'm not going to change these global adjustments because I think that they are fine, but I'm going to move into my selective tones section here. These selective tones allow us to brighten or darken different brightness levels in the image. So what that means are the highlights here, this slider, those are the brighter values within the image. They're the things that are sort of like in highlight area or in the brighter areas of the photo, compared to the midtones, The midtones are the things that are kind of gray. So they're not black, they're not white, they're right in the middle. And then the shadows and the blacks, those are the darker values in the image. And in this case, I don't want my shadows to be brought up so much. I like the original contrast of the image. I think what we needed in this case was the highlights, this tone to be crushed a little bit. Watch what happens when I double click on this slider. So I'm just going to home the slider, get it back to its default. I'm going to do that the same way with midtones. And you can see what those sliders have done, right? In fact, let's cover this again. If I take my highlight slider to the right, any of those very bright values, they're going to get brighter. If I take my highlight slider to the left, my values are going to get darker, right? So you can kind of mute those shadow or those highlight tones. And actually, you can see those highlights and our histogram being adjusted kind of in a live way as we adjust that highlights slider. You see in the upper right corner that histogram is also, adjustments are being reflected in that histogram. So I'm going to go in and just sort of adjust my highlights a little bit. I think I'm going to brighten my midtones just a touch. As I do this, I'm noticing that some of the skin tones look a little bit kind of washed out and a little bit oversaturated. There's too much red in this skin tone, and that has to do with the way that the film existed and worked, and then how the print exists and works, and then faded between, you know, its time of being printed and when this was scanned. But we can sort of adjust that, right? And we can do that by now moving into control points and manually adjusting the first skin tone, and then maybe using the same control point, duplicating it, and using it on other skin tones, other folks whose skin tones in this case are the same for the most part. And even if you had to do this with 2 or 3 different control points, this could be relatively straightforward. So I'm going to take my brightness slider down a little bit. Let me start over with that for just a second. I'm going to delete this control point. Okay. These adjustments, let's back up. The adjustments that we've made so far to global and selective tones, those adjusted the entire image. As we move in and I click on the control point button here, now what we're going to do is target certain areas in the image. So I'm going to take a control point and place it on this young lady's skin tone. I'm just going to size the area of influence so that it encompasses her skin. And now the control point makes a selection of her face, basically. And we can adjust those here and there a little bit. But for the most part, the beauty of the control point is it makes a really nice photographic looking selection. So when I go into that brightness slider and I start adjusting sort of the washed out skin tone that I was getting from the way that the print was working, it's just adjusting the skin. And in this case, just adjusting the skin on her. So I'm going to take a little bit of saturation out of her skin, and I'm actually going to take the warmth and just a touch, just out of her skin a little bit. Now from there, I'm going to do the same thing on every other person, and if we need to, we can adjust it. So let me rephrase that. This control point, we can duplicate this and put it on each of these individual people. And then from there, if we need to make adjustments, we can. So to duplicate a control point, you just hold the Option key down on your Mac, or Alt if you're on a PC. And while you're holding the Option key down, you click on your control point and drag away. That's going to duplicate that control point, and you can do that for each one of these people. If it's appropriate, you know, maybe on this gentleman, maybe it doesn't work so well. Let's see on him. It looks pretty good. Maybe we need to adjust that one a little bit. It's really just the folks who have a little bit of a highlight going on their skin tone, at least on my screen. But we can go in and individually adjust those from there. Like let's say we actually put a duplicate on this gentleman here, and then we decide, oh, you know what? Maybe that one doesn't work so well. We need to actually brighten that value back up. So we can go into our sliders on the right side and we can make any adjustments we need to the individual control points. Now, oftentimes I'll kind of just go and wander around the image and sort of just look at the individual areas and tones and figure out if any values should be adjusted, any brightness areas, any sections of the image that need to be adjusted. In this case, with the white table here, the picnic table, I actually want to add a bunch of contrast because that's going to draw your attention as the viewer down a little bit more. And one of the issues that's happening with this photograph, sort of overall, that I can kind of start to rectify a little bit, is that the brightness of the background is much brighter than the foreground. And by adding a little attraction here, by brightening this area and adding some contrast, maybe going into this shirt that has all sorts of detail in it, and adding some structure to it. I'm actually going to darken that value and then add structure. And what that's going to do is attract your eye as the viewer, just that first control point. Now, I want to tell you about what every one of these control points is doing and how it's kind of working, but we have to continue forward. So I'm going to just take a look at our before and after. There's the original scanned image. And then as I let go of the after, we'll see the enhanced image. If we've taken this, so I like what's happening overall, but maybe the overall effect is just a smidge too strong. In Photoshop, I'll show you how to sort of back down our effect a little bit. And so what can be useful to know is that, like, if we like this effect overall, we can just save it as a preset by moving into the lower right corner of the interface and clicking the Save Preset button, hopefully. And I've lost, oh, there it is. So we're going to name this July Get Together, and that will be the name of our preset. I don't know why it's showing up behind my interface. Notice this, but anyways, it should pop up in front of the interface. This is the first time this has happened. I just updated the software 2 days ago as well, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but enter to the most recent version, I should say, which of course sometimes there's little things like that. Enter name to new preset, July Get Together, save control points. I'm going to click Save here, and that's not only going to save all of the adjustments that are global, but because I clicked that checkbox to save the control points, the next time I use this preset, these control points will be on the image, which is great in some capacities, and oftentimes they need to be removed off of a preset because they don't work on every image. Anyways, let's click the Apply button in the lower right corner. And let's say we love this overall effect, but maybe we want it at, I don't know, 90% or 80% of sort of the adjustment that we've made. Because we're working here within Photoshop, it's pretty easy to move over into the Layers palette. And then in the Layers palette, you can take the opacity of the layer down. Now, you can also do this in Photoshop Elements if you're an Elements user, but it pertains to the way Photoshop interfaces with the Nik plugins and the way that layers work and so on. So this is just a nice little trick because you can say, okay, you know what? 81, 91, whatever percentage is the ideal amount for that. And here we've kind of opened up those shadows. All right, so let's keep moving. I'm gonna not save that one. This is our next image here. And here we've got sort of a lovely portrait. I think almost all my images have people this time. Usually I have at least one that's not just people. Anyways, we've got Uncle Clay, Aunt Sarah, and Judy here. And this is a really lovely, wintertime photograph from central New York. But it's not without its problems. It's a high contrast scene. People are out in the snow. I've overexposed a little bit so that we get this kind of glowing effect overall. But what happens then is we lose detail in our high contrast areas, in our highlights, and possibly in the shadows. In this case, the shadows don't look too dark, but we're going to take care of that. We're going to do that using color effects, and we're going to stylize the image a little bit beyond that. So the last piece of software that we were using, Viveza 3, is designed for adjusting light and color. We could absolutely use Viveza 3 on this image to adjust light and color to get a natural photographic looking effect. We could also do that using Color Efex Pro, but what I want to show you is how to apply some of these filters to create maybe a more stylized winter effect. So let's go into Color Efex Pro 4. And Color Efex is a collection of 55 individual filters, right? So Viveza is designed for utilizing control points, utilizing light and color to direct the viewer's attention through the image. Color Efex can do similar things, but it can also do a whole bunch of other different things, like apply film effects. So I'll just click on Film Effects Nostalgic, right? Or if you follow me on the left side of the interface, I'll click on Film Effects Faded. Each one of these filters over on the left-hand side does a thing. Dark contrast, right? Cross processing, it's a filter. And each one of these filters on the left side has its own set of sort of presets, which is really quite interesting. So if we look at cross processing and sort of scroll our little cursor to the right a little bit from cross processing, a little stack of prints that are highlighted. And if you click on those little rectangles, little stack of prints, this is going to display, in this case, 7 different presets for this particular filter. And what's so great about this is that it shows you some of the potential things that you could get out of this particular image if it were applied, you know, like this, by clicking on preset number 2, which is using a particular set of parameters in the filter over here on the right-hand side. Cross-processing is a really cool filter. It's a filter that's sort of a holdover from the film days where you'd use one kind of film in camera and you would have it processed using not the correct chemistry. Depending upon how you did that and what film you were using, you'd get different kinds of effects. But here in Color Efex Pro, you don't have to worry about shooting film if you don't want to shoot film. And you don't have to worry about locking yourself into one particular look because, of course, you can move into the individual filter and adjust it from, you know, G05 to L03. I don't actually know what these titles are. I mean, it's C01 and it's L05, but I don't know what that translates specifically into. I do know this says E6 to C41, so that's a positive chrome film, positive film. Sorry, let me click on that. And it's being processed as if it were negative film. So you get this sort of high contrast, vintagey kind of muted, strange colors. If you just follow me up to the top here, this particular filter, this section is C41 to E6, so that's as if you're shooting negative film. And anyways, each one of these different filters, cross-processing, or you go back over here to the left side and you click on something like Detail Extractor, each one of these individual filters is designed to do a thing, right? Cross-processing does what I just talked about. Detail Extractor extracts the details out of the highlights and out of the shadows, right? Now, from there, you can actually adjust the image, right? So you click on the preset or the filter. You could use the preset that's one of those presets on the left side there, or you could just go over to the Detail Extractor sliders and you could decide how much detail you want to extract or how little detail you want to extract. It's easy to take these things really far. Sometimes those might actually look really cool. I could actually envision, a really beautiful print of a landscape image shot in the winter that uses a lot of this detail extraction, and then it's printed on metal or something, on aluminum, so that those details and textures can kind of really hold up nicely. But each one, we're not going to leave this image with this very strong application, but each one of these filters does a thing, its own thing. And each one is going to help you to kind of achieve a different look. And what I'm going to suggest is that you find a couple filters that you really like, use them and learn them, and then expand from there. I love Detail Extractor on snow or high contrast images like this because we can get more texture out of that snow. I'm sort of just playing around with these sliders. Watch what happens if I turn off this filter. So over here on the right side, if I click on the little checkbox that's to the left of the title, Detail Extractor, we go from this image, which is great. It's beautiful smiles, nice image and so on. But we click on the Detail Extractor, and now we've got this very Norman Rockwell-esque kind of contrast range, right? And what could be better for a holiday image than Norman Rockwell sort of contrast range for an image like this? Now, we can control this even more. So we don't have to leave it Norman Rockwell. We can make it Dan Hughes, or we can make it, Laurie Rubin or whoever. by adjusting this ourselves and utilizing our own kind of vision on the image. So let's do that. I'm going to take this detail extractor, I'm going to bump it up a little bit further than I think I want it. I'm then going to go into our control points, and I'm going to remove, using the minus control points, the filter from the areas where I don't want them, right? And where I don't want this detail extractor is on our human skin, and maybe we don't want it so much on some of our clothing, right? So we can kind of return back to a kind of regular photographic scale of brightness levels. It doesn't look so, stylized, maybe. Again, it's up to you as the creative to decide how much or how little of this stylization you might want. What's so great about these control points is that you get to decide globally using those control points, but then using the global adjustments, but then you can go in selectively and you can decide exactly how much of the detail extraction you want, right? So now with that one filter, we go from here, the original, to here. Now our snowscape is just a little bit less distracting because we've got some value within those highlights. We've got tone within the highlight areas. Great. Now I don't know where to look, right? We've of course got our couple, and we've got Judy, and they're all standing there so nicely, but now all of the brightness levels of the whole image are about the same. So we will add, 3 more filters to massage these tones, right? The detail extractor, main attempt or goal here in this case on this image is to get a little bit more texture going out of the highlight area for the most part. Once we've got the adjustments made to our detail extractor, we're going to click the Add Filter button. We're going to move into our Pro Contrast. And the Pro Contrast filter is this really fantastic filter that basically helps us to optimize our contrast overall. It has 3 sliders. You can correct the color cast, you can correct the contrast, or you can use this dynamic contrast slider. And all of these things do their own thing, right? So Pro Contrast, it's these 3 sliders, but this is a sort of proprietary tool. A lot of the filters within Color Efex and within the Nik collection are proprietary. You'll really only find them here within this filter set, let alone maybe within Photolab, DxO's Photolab, the raw processing software. But Pro Contrast is looking at this image, and with the correct color cast slider, it looks at the photograph and it determines whether the image is predominantly warm or predominantly cool. And then this slider attempts to fix that. In this case, the image doesn't have a whole lot of color to go off of, so you don't see this color being skewed at all, or much, if any. So I don't think it needs much, if any, of that color correction slider. But if the image had more color or had a significant color cast, this slider is helpful to help clean that up. The correct contrast slider is going to do just a nice job to sort of optimize the contrast. If I take it too far, it doesn't look all that great. But if I sort of am careful with the amount of the adjustment that I'm adding, and I maybe go into our dynamic contrast, now we're getting more pop out of the image. I know where to look a little bit more because my eye is drawn into these human forms, and there are some different tones throughout the image. Without the Pro Contrast filter, in this case, the image is a little flat, which is great. It can be aesthetically pleasing as well, but in my situation here, I want to add that Pro Contrast filter, add a little bit of extra pop to the image. We're going to add our filter. So every time we're done with a particular filter, we just click the Add Filter button. By the way, the 4 filters that we're using for this image are 4 of my favorite filters. So if you're just starting out and you want to try out some different filters, the detail extractor, Pro Contrast, cross processing, these are all really great filters for doing the particular thing that they're doing. But I like them because they're simple and because they're quick and they look really good, right? And in this case, I'm going to use C01. So as with any filter, initially when you click on it, it might be, a little overzealous, a little powerful. So what we'll do is take our method and just reduce this down. And what I love about this cross-processing filter is that I kind of get this skew of saturation and adjustment, slightly different look. even if I'm only at 6 or 7%. You know, if we bring this way up, it's very noticeable. That can be great. I think that the contrast is a little too strong in that case. But I think even at this very low percentage, at 8%, we can get just this little extra bit of color or difference of color. I'm going to click the Add Filter button. We're going to finish this image off, and we're going to keep moving because it is now 4:42. I could talk your ear off about this stuff forever. I still have another image I want to show you, and a whole other piece of software I want to introduce you to. So let's finish this image with the Darken, Lighten Center filter to, again, sort of solidify or really direct the viewer's attention into the area where I want you to look. So the Darken, Lighten Center filter, what it does is it allows you to apply a kind of, it's kind of like a vignette, but it's this sleight of eye trick vignette. It's not really noticeable as a vignette or a darkening or lightening of the edge of the image. And so it's a really beautiful filter to help kind of relight the image. I've applied it at its most extreme, and we're not going to do that, but I did that. I took the center luminosity all the way up to 100 and the border luminosity all the way down to -100, so that when we click this Place Center button, I can get a really good feel for what's happening and where, right? So the Place Center button allows you to place the center so you can adjust your center luminosity. And then, of course, whatever's not in the center is the border in that case. So you can see like the difference between the center luminosity and the border, if that makes any sense at all. Anyways, the last slider, center size. If I bring this down to 0, we get a very small center, right, where the border area kind of takes over. If I bring this up into the right, now the center is much larger, and therefore there's, you know, this play between the play between the border and the center. This is another way to control the size of that. I don't want to brighten the center as much as we are. I want it to be a little bit more subtle. I don't want to darken the borders as much as I have either. And I also don't want to darken down the dog's face here. So I'm going to go ahead and just reduce by taking that minus control point and putting a minus or a couple minus control points on our pup there, so that we're not darkening her down because she's closer to the border than our center area. Let's look at this before and after. So I'm going to click the compare button in the upper right corner here. This is the original image. It's fine. You know, it's nice. I kind of like that it's relatively flat, but here's our enhanced image. I think I've pushed the contrast a little further than I want to overall, but basically, you know, we're directing the viewer's attention through the image, and we're doing that by lightening the areas we want to lightening the areas we want to direct people to, and darkening areas that we want to push the viewer's attention away from. I'm going to click the OK button in the lower right corner of the interface here. So by doing that, by directing the viewer's attention, you know, both in camera, because that's ideal when possible, but also in post-processing like this, we can get our sort of holiday images in this case to a different level, right? And we've primarily been utilizing, you know, just pictures of people here. All of these same kinds of techniques work just fine with any other kind of image as well. These are sort of all general techniques. Now, I've got 2 more images to show you, but I just want to talk you through Analog Efex Pro to create a kind of stylized effect on any kind of photo. In this case, this great holiday image. So let's go back to this photograph, which has our Viveza adjustments, and then let's go into Analog Efex Pro. I'll walk you through the general use, and then we'll find a really nice kind of analog stylistic effect to use. Analog Efex is a tool that basically takes the 200-something years of photographic technology, going from early wet plates and daguerreotype kinds of photography all the way up into our sort of digital realm here. And it allows us to apply vintage effects, if you will, or apply the sort of aesthetic attributes that were signatures of old problematic processes. What that means is with digital images, our photos are practically perfect right out of camera, which is great, but oftentimes they kind of lack you know, a whole lot of soul, right? And so right out of camera, we can have the most amazing soulful picture ever, but it looks maybe a little bit flat, or maybe it looks, you know, a little too contemporary for what we're after. So what's cool about this software, Analog Efex Pro, is that you can basically just click on all of these different preset setups and get a completely different kind of analog effect, right? So in this case, this is utilizing the double exposure filter, and that's why you're starting to see like the movement of the hand of our little baker who's learning. And in this case, it kind of creates an interesting kinetic energy, you know, this movement that's being captured. It wasn't in the image originally, right? But now it's brighter, it's this double exposure, it actually kind of works nicely. We don't need to land on this. This is just one of the presets. I just kind of got excited when I saw that pop up. And that's what these presets will do. You know, they even if you're like, oh, you know, that's way too strong. Well, you can get excited about these images, new images, old images. You can make old images look new again and new images look old. Okay, so how do you use this software? Well, we launched the tool, and then I went directly into the upper left corner and I clicked into our cameras, right? So follow me into the upper left corner. We're in the En Vogue section. I like the En Vogue filters. These are actually presets that I've created for this software. And so I gravitate to those, but you might find you like a particular tool combination, or you might find that you'd like to create your own tool combination. To do that, again, you click on the cameras section in the upper left corner. This dialog launches, and you have different tool combinations on the right side, and then a list of the tools on the left side here and what they do as well, which is kind of cool. But anyways, the tool combinations allow you, let's click on vintage camera. So we click on vintage camera, and we get a new set of presets over here on the left side. Basically, that's what happens. You have your cameras, you click on one, and then you get presets on the left side. And then from there, you can augment and change those presets. Now, that's not really enough for a lot of photographers and a lot of creatives. Some folks want to be able to build their own camera or their own combinations of things. But basically, here, the vintage camera utilizes these filters from Analog Efex Pro: basic adjustments, bokeh, light leaks, lens vignette, film type, and then frames down at the bottom here, right? And each one of these vintage cameras is actually going to be using those same filters from the right side. So this one, I clicked on vintage camera 6. It's going to take a second for it to load, but we're going to see basic adjustments, bokeh, light leaks, lens vignette, film type, and then frames, right? And so we get a completely different kind of effect from this particular preset. And each one looks different. And if you click this button, I'm feeling lucky, it'll actually randomize these particular tools. So you could create something completely different just simply by clicking I feel lucky. And as you keep clicking on it, it's going to cycle through and randomize the adjustments, which could be interesting. Actually, in this case, I like what's happening here. Let's save this as a preset so I can maybe come back to it and adjust it later. So to save a preset, you make your different adjustments to the tools on the right side, and then click Save over here underneath the tool set on the right side. Now, as you click the Save button, I'm going to save this as Happy Holidays and click the OK button. As I save this, the left side of the interface is actually going to change, right? Because now I've saved my preset into my own custom section here. So these are all presets that I've created, you know, for my own photography and for my own uses. So those are all in there. Okay, long story short, I'm going to click the OK button because we're coming up on time here. I've got one more image. I'm just going to open up into Analog Efex Pro, and then Lori, we can transition into a Q&A. And I bet we probably have lots of questions coming in for this demo. There's all sorts of things. There's so many things that we can't get into because there's so many things to talk about, but there are so many tools that I want to cover for these 45 minutes that I'm supposed to be talking. Okay, let's jump into this image. Let's go into Analog Efex Pro, and we're gonna have some fun with this photograph. It's a beautiful photograph of these two young ladies, and we actually as we open it up, oftentimes the last set of adjustments that were open or aren't that effective. So in this case, well, let's click on Happy Holidays. Yeah, I think that's what we're on right now. I don't think that that's going to work, but it could be interesting. Yeah, because it's the same effect. Actually, that's kind of beautiful. Let's change this a little bit. So we click on our preset that we just used. Let's move over into the basic adjustments. And the basic adjustments, it's actually darkening the image a little bit. Let's bring that back. Let's brighten it back up a little. I like this detail extraction. That's fine. Let's add a little contrast. We want to get a little richness back to the image, because I think it had this really rich tone that originally to it, and we want to get that back. But I also want to direct your attention. The bokeh filter does a good job to do that, but right now I want to sort of focus on the expression of these two kids. And so we're going to do that by adjusting our bokeh filter, right? And so what's happening here with this on image control with using the bokeh filter is we're retaining the sharpness on our two little kids, and then we are reducing sharpness. We're blurring around the areas down here, and that's going to help direct the viewer's attention, right? Because we're keeping certain areas sharp, and then we are reducing the sharpness in another area that is important compositionally, but I don't need you as the viewer to really pay much attention to, you know, she's got really cute little boots on, and he's got these really great jeans on. We can see that, but if we blur it a little bit, it becomes less of the action, less important to the viewer, and the areas that retain sharpness become a little bit more important. In which case, any kind of image can, you know, yield great result from that. This is the light leaks filter. It's too strong in this case, but I love the sort of lightening of the tone. And then we're going to go into film types, and I'm just going to bring back some of that richness, because the film type filter was actually fading the shadow tones a little bit. It was creating a little bit of a darker feel overall. There we go. A little warmth. Nice. A little bit of grain. We click the OK button, and voila, we have our beautiful analogued, our sort of like image, our creative analog adjustment. Anyways, Lori, I have plenty more to talk about, but we have very little time. So I say we transition into our Q&A.
Okay, beautiful image, by the way. I was peeking over there to see what you're doing. That's really lovely. Okay, let's see here. So Robert has two questions. They have to do with control points.
Okay.
The first one is, why is the control point area round instead of the selected area?
Yep.
That's the first question.
Okay.
The second one is, can you mask an area, then apply the filter to the area outside?
Let's handle that one in a second. I'm not following it, but I'll answer the first one, and then we'll go back. So the control points, the circle stays a circle on a control point, because it's considered the area of influence. It's not considered what is actually being selected. But basically, as I jumped into Viveza here, I've clicked the control point button. This is our control point. If I make it really big and encompass that whole area there, of course, this is a circle going around the control point, but it's not going to be making a selection of the circle. It's going to be making a selection of the area that we've placed the point on, that is inside of the circle, that is the same tone, color, and texture. Basically, the point attempts to make a selection of the object. In fact, you can see the selection, and the point, basically the short answer to the question is, it doesn't change the shape. The circle doesn't change shape because it's supposed to be a simple, way of working. If you want to get a little bit more complex, you move into your control points list, and you can actually click on the, it's a little box with a circle in it, and this displays the mask. And what the mask is doing is displaying anything that is white is being selected by this point, and anything that's black is not being selected. And anything that's a shade of gray, the lighter the gray, the closer it is to white, the lighter the gray, the more the effect this control point is going to have. And the closer to black, the less of the effect the control point is going to have. But you can see it's not making a circular selection here. It's making a selection inside of the circle, And then it's also attempting to make a photographic looking selection, right? So the importance there is the difference, right? The difference between this and using a lasso tool in Photoshop, if you will, is that a lasso tool is a design tool. It's designed to cut something out. It's for crafts, right? Photography is a craft, but it deals with light. And the idea of the control point is that you decide where you want to make the effect happen, you encompass the area, and then your adjustments are they look more like something that would have been done in a dark room, right? In this case, just this very crazy selective dark room, right? If that makes sense, with the idea of making that sort of photographic looking selection. Okay, hopefully that answers that. Lori,
yeah, so the next question, I believe what he's saying is, if you, let's say, use a control point to mask a particular area, can you then apply a filter outside of that masked area? And I think you're kind of showing it here with the different masks that you're able to view.
Got it. Yes, I'll jump over into Color Efex because I think that's that's what they're getting at. I think this one's hard to translate. Can you say it again, Lori, as this opens?
Sure. Okay, so he said, can you mask an area, then apply the filter to the area outside? So I'm interpreting it as, if you, let's say, masked, her hair, for instance.
Yep, so I'm removing it from her hair.
Right. Can you add a filter outside of her hair area? Let's say against the wall.
Yeah, like back here. Yes.
Yes.
Now there will be a sort of spill because it's, if this were to happen in real life, if that light was happening like that, it would likely spill over, through the optical system, onto, in her hair in real life. And so there's going to be a little bit of that spillover. If you don't want that, you just take more control points and you place them in those areas. Those are constricting control points. These are minus control points, removing the effect to kind of guarantee that you don't have that kind of spillover. I think that's that, is it?
I think it is, but David's asking an inverse selection question mark.
Inverse selection.
So,
yeah. I mean, in that case, I think you would just use, you'd put minus control points where you don't want the effect, and you put plus control points where you do want the effect. And if you want to inverse that, you've got to switch those control points. You just got to adjust the opacity.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no like control I or anything like that. That just
right. Okay. Well, Dan, I think you actually answered quite a few questions along the way. So great job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so I think with this, we're going to go ahead and close out. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and happy holidays to everybody. Dan, I'll let you go ahead and say the last word. Again, thank you for a really lovely presentation today.
Thank you, Lori. My pleasure. Hopefully this was fun. I haven't done a webinar in several weeks now, so I feel a little bit rusty, but we covered a lot of stuff in this webinar. There's a ton more information and presentations all over the web, but specifically if you go to YouTube and you search Nik Collection by DxO, there's an official page, and there are so many webinars and recorded videos on there to check out. Have a really safe holidays, ladies and gentlemen. I can't speak for some reason now, but stay safe and be joyous. Thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Bye-bye.